No. Ooh, that's better, right, babe?
Yeah!
Yeah. She founded an architectural concrete company.
He founded a $100 million clothing company.
She took the world by storm as a social media star.
He took the world by storm as a famous serial entrepreneur.
Together we started a business.
And had babies.
Now we're figuring out the best ways to do both.
Join us as we learn from other entrepreneurs going through the same life struggles.
As they share their life hacks about success, love, kids.
And everything in between.
Welcome to this episode of the Pretty and Punk podcast. My name is Dan Caldwell.
And I'm Ildiko Ferenczi.
And we have another great show today. I'm really excited about it. Actually, do you want me to give you a hint?
No.
You want me to give you a hint?
No. You're such a dork.
You like that?
I do. I'm really excited, guys. It's another female entrepreneur that's done incredible things with her life on this business journey, and let's get into it.
And with kids too.
Oh my God. Not just one, but you'll find out.
Yeah, she's done great. Are you sure you don't want a hint?
No, we're not going to give anyone a hint.
Okay, take it away.
Born the youngest of 5 kids, after working in media for several years, she becomes the youngest female VP at America Online, in charge of shopping partnerships. After leaving AOL, she discovered she needed a healthy change in her diet, but couldn't find what she was looking for. So she decided to create it. She's been named the EY Entrepreneur of the Year in 2017 and one of InStyle's 2019 Badass 50. She's the host of her podcast, The Kara Goldin Show, author of the new best-selling book, Undaunted, Overcoming Doubts and Doubters. She's the founder and CEO of the award-winning unsweetened flavor water Hint, $100+ million company, by the way. She's an amazing wife to her husband, Theo, and an incredible mother to her 4 beautiful children. Please welcome Kara Goldin. Welcome.
Hey, Kara. Welcome to the Pretty and Punk podcast. It's so good to have you on the show.
We're so excited to have you.
We're down here in Los Angeles. We know you're just north of us, right? Up near San Francisco?
Exactly. Marin County.
Nice.
Yeah, it was so lucky we came across you. We were looking through some videos on our television about different entrepreneurs, and an interview of you came up, and you were talking about your kids, and we just thought, oh, this is a great interview. And then we found out you had a book coming out, so we just thought you were perfect for our show. So thank you for taking the interview.
I appreciate it.
I'd love to take the first question. Kara, you call yourself an accidental entrepreneur, which I have a hard time believing, in your book, Undaunted. Now, if we could take it back to Kara as a child, who do you feel influenced you as an entrepreneur to walk this entrepreneurial journey?
It's a good question. I mean, it's one that I talk about, I thought about a lot when I was writing the book, because I was the last of 5 kids. I grew up in Scottsdale way back in the day when it was like a small town. And you know, being the last of 5 kids, I always felt that my brothers and sisters had so many other options. I mean, they thought of me as like the spoiled last child, but I was bumming that they all had money and I didn't, right? Like I just was, so I was constantly, just trying to learn from them. My brother used to fix up cars, and he would old VWs, and he would resell them. And he would sometimes he'd make mistakes. Like I remember when he decided to get a little crazy and buy an MG and fix it up and then try and sell it. And he would always tell me, that was really stupid. Like, you don't make as much margin. He said, never do that, and he was like, always have a stereo in there and all these things. And again, I'm just, like a little puppy dog listening. And my dad had founded I call him a frustrated entrepreneur, because he worked for a large company, ConAgra, but he had started a brand called Healthy Choice. And And so again, so many lessons along the way. I mean, I was just talking to somebody about this the other day, a college kid that I remember my dad, who'd be in his early 90s now, how, he never would leave his role, his job, because it just was not the thing you did. Like can you imagine how stressful it would be when you're whatever, 18, 21, whatever, you're picking your job for the rest of your life. I mean, no one has, like, you almost think it's a little weird when people have a job for too long now versus it's just, right. It's just the opposite of what, he went through. And I think what I learned from him, he was actually laid off when I was in high school because he didn't have an MBA. And I'm just sitting here looking, wait a minute, you have this incredibly successful product and you were so loyal, yet like that didn't count for anything. Right. And I remember just thinking, well, how does that add up? And you know what? Sometimes things don't add up, right? But sometimes people have perceptions about, the way the world is supposed to work. And I think more than anything, what I realized from all these different sources is that you've just got to go out and try and live and have fun and learn along the way. And so anyway, being the parent of 4 kids, I think that's what they do as well. I mean, I instill on them. People always ask, are they going to take over your company Hint? And I'm like, I don't know. I just want them to be happy. That's it. Yeah. Right. 100%. And I want them to know that they can go do and have a good time, but also be kind and keep learning and, and consider yourself lucky and all those things that I feel are so important. And don't judge people just because they are doing something that maybe you don't have an interest in, right? And just instead, just take the time to learn along the way. And I think that is what I'm probably the most proud of in just being a parent.
I love that. I love
that. You know what? I see some parallels in the book with your dad and maybe you when you were at AOL. Like you were both kind of creatives and you could explore but you were still working for somebody, right? You had some leeway, but you were working for somebody. Let's go back and talk about, let's start the story. What really gave you the idea for Hint and what made you follow through with it?
I graduated, I went to school in Arizona. I went to Arizona State University and I always wanted to be in journalism. And I didn't understand, actually, a few of my friends were taking some finance classes and I was always afraid of finance. That was just not my thing. And so I remember just kind of feeling stupid around them and not really understanding them talk about EBITDA. And, I barely had heard of margins from my brother when I was little, but I thought, I'm in a place to learn. I should go learn. And I speak on college campuses all the time. And I said, if you ever just think that that's what somebody else does, go do it. Right. You may find that it really isn't your thing, but at least you can sort of keep up a little bit to really understand enough to get you in trouble. Right. And as I always say. And so I didn't want to major in finance. I didn't want to do finance but I'm really happy that I know enough to read a business or write a business plan and, read a balance sheet and do some really, really basic things. And anyway, I used to read Fortune magazine. I used to read Wall Street Journal too. And Wall Street Journal was painful for me, but I would sit there and I would read it and I would save up copies and go through them. But for me, Fortune was just much easier. So I thought when I graduate, I'm going to go get a job at Fortune. And my friends would say, how are you going to do that? And I'm like, I'm going to get on a plane and I'm going to go to New York. I had never traveled to New York. I mean, you guys are in California. We used to come to California all the time, but I never went east. We had 5 kids. There were a lot of reasons why we didn't do that, but I didn't even know there were subways when I got to New York. I was just clueless on a lot of levels. Right. And so anyway, ended up, that's a story, of its in and of itself, but I wanted to work for Fortune and be in journalism. Never got a job at Fortune, but another publication in the building, Time Magazine. Nothing fancy. I was an executive assistant, but I think more than anything, what I realized is that if you work hard and you actually are curious and you're enjoyable to work for and you're respectful, that, I mean, people wanted me on their team. And then I got recruited by this almost like it was a startup, but it was like a later stage startup called CNN. And I went to CNN, which was a lot of fun, still kind of in media and journalism. And then met my husband in a bar, as my kids always say. It's possible. My parents have been married for 25 years.
They have to point that out. We met in Vegas, so we know exactly what you mean.
It can happen. And so we ended up getting engaged, and he wanted to get into technology, and that's what got us to San Francisco. And I just thought, okay, I'll go, and maybe I'll stay with CNN, or maybe I'll go do something else. I'd heard about this guy, Steve Jobs, and you know, he was working at this tech company at Apple, and I thought there's no way I can get a job there. But I'd heard about this tiny little startup that was spinning out of Apple. There was like 5 guys in an office. I didn't know that until I actually got there. And they were doing CD-ROM shopping, essentially putting catalogs onto a disc. And I thought, wow, that'd be really fun. I don't know what I would do there, but it'd be super fun because I like to catalog shop. And I don't know, maybe I don't know anybody in San Francisco anyway. So I just cold called and ended up getting a job there, not really looking, but they had given me this thing called equity. I didn't even know what equity was. And I was just like, my husband was a new graduate from law school. And so he knows what equity is. And he's like, this is crazy. They're giving you equity in the company. They just met you. I mean, that's nuts, right?
Right.
So I ended up taking that. And, you know, it was a lot of fun. And about 6 months later, this company called America Online that I had kind of heard about ended up acquiring us. And suddenly I'm running this thing called shopping. I mean, who wouldn't want to run something called shopping? It was just crazy. I mean, it was insane. And it was so much fun. And every day I was learning. I was meeting with, you know, some of the stores I liked, like J. Crew and The Gap, but others I, you know, didn't really understand that much. But I thought I'm just learning all the time. I mean, who would give me this responsibility? I don't even deserve it. Like, I mean, on a lot of levels, it was just crazy. And I thought of, you know, as long as no one figures this out, that I really shouldn't be here. I'm here. I'm just like showing up. So 7 years later, it's $1 billion in revenue to AOL. I'm, you know, just having a great time. I've been through what's termed a hockey stick, where the company is just growing significantly. Somewhere along the way, I had 3 kids at this point, and they were under the age of 4. So I very much remember where you guys are at on a lot of levels. And I was on the plane all the time. I had babysitters, and I remember thinking, it's $1 billion in revenue. Do I wait until it's 2 billion at some point? And I just felt like I had this responsibility back home, and I really wanted to see my kids. I loved them. And, you know, my husband's working a lot as well. And I just thought, I'm going to take a couple of years off. And so I did. And I mention this because not only did it lead to the founding of Hint, but it was, I was going through something that I couldn't have articulated at the time that I think a lot of people go through, but sort of unconsciously, which is that I was after going through this huge growth curve and just a lot of excitement and adrenaline and everything, then things started to level off. Thankfully, they weren't sort of tanking, but it just was a natural progression to sort of get normal. And I was just feeling really bored, and it was just not as exciting anymore. And I would say these things that I'm not kind of bored, and so I got out at that point, and, you know, probably one step away from what I think as humans we all do when we feel that way. Then we start to get angry, you know, resentful, right? I wasn't quite there yet, but that's when I thought, okay, while I'm trying to figure out what I want to do next, what I want to do is get my health back. I had gained a bunch of weight over the course of all of my pregnancies. I developed terrible adult acne that I didn't even have as a teenager, and my energy levels had really sunk. And that's when I was, trying different diets, watching my calories in my food. No one had ever told me, maybe it's your drink. But one day, my diet soda, my Diet Coke was kind of staring at me in the face in the kitchen. And I thought, wow, there's a lot of ingredients in this Diet Coke that I don't really understand. Maybe I should not drink that. And I decided to put it to the side just as a test. And in 2.5 weeks, I lost over 20 pounds.
Wow.
My skin totally cleared up. I remembered back to my probably 6th grade science class where, you learn like your skin is your largest organ.
Right.
And, and I started really connecting the dots around, first of all, everyone told me exercise and eat right. Right. No one talked to me about drinking. Right. And, about what you drink is important. I just kept hearing the same thing, exercise and eat right. Mm-hmm. And then the other piece of it was that my skin was clearly reacting to a body that was just going through, my internals were just like in bad situation.
Right.
And so by just giving up my diet soda and these diet sweeteners, I changed myself. And so for the next year, I was still trying to figure out exactly what I wanted to do career-wise. I had made a decision at this point that I was going to go back and do something. I kept thinking it was in tech. But that's when every single day I would wake up and I would think about how just by giving up this diet soda, I realized that I should drink more water. I had always heard water was better for me, but I didn't drink it because water was boring. So I started slicing up fruit and throwing it in water.
Yeah.
And this new store, Whole Foods, had just opened in the Bay Area. And I was shopping there for groceries for dinner. And I thought, gosh, I should try and find a product that just has water with fruit in it so that it's as easy as drinking Diet Coke, where I can just go pull it off the shelf. I was shocked that all these drinks had some sort of either sugar or diet sweetener in it. And then I started seeing other ones that I really hadn't paid attention to that were super hot, like vitamin water. And I was shocked by vitamin water had more than 300 calories in it. They didn't even have a diet version 15 years ago of the product. And I would ask friends who were drinking vitamin water, I would say, so why do you drink that? And they'd say it tastes good and it's really healthy. And I kept saying, but why do you think it's healthy? So I mentioned this because I think there's so many products, and there's still products today where the brain kind of tricks us into believing that they're healthier than they are. I call them healthy perception versus healthy reality.
Right.
There's all these labels.
And the companies are trying to trick us, right?
It's a problem.
Totally. And sometimes, it's fascinating as I've been in this world. Like, it's fascinating even how some manufacturers don't really even understand what they're doing. Like, the word organic, there's a lot of different organic certifications. And depending on whether or not you could use organic flour that is coming from Mexico, for example. And it's, not to pick on Mexico, but there's a lot of different, meanings to it, and standards, and it just depends. So again, I was a consumer. I was somebody that had seen how I had been fooled, and that's when I said, "Gosh, while I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do next, maybe I should just take this product to Whole Foods and see if I can get it on the shelf." And it sounds good. My book is called Undaunted: Overcoming Doubts and Doubters.
So
People
good
always,
too.
Thank you. People always ask me over the years, or not only ask me, but also made statements to me like, "Oh, you're a risk taker. You always knew you were going to be successful. You always, you never had any failures along the way." And I would always be thinking in my head, wow, is that what I look like? I would think about these stories along the way. And then I just thought, I started journaling about a little over 4 years ago. And I started thinking, gosh, if I could actually publish all of these notes, they could really help a lot of people. Yeah. And so that is how I decided to do it.
That's
You just did it. It's such a great, it's a classic entrepreneurial story. You saw a problem and you went out to figure out some way to fix it.
And you never gave up.
I mean, that's probably the best way to become an entrepreneur, right?
Yes.
Like there's a lot of people who like come up with an idea first, it's like, oh, I'm trying to figure out what I want to sell. I want to make money. And instead you found a problem and then you tried to solve it. That's the best way to become an entrepreneur.
And all the obstacles
Note to
in her
everybody out
way,
there who's listening.
She kept going. That's fantastic. And I want to bring you back to a conversation that happened in the kitchen with your husband. Dan and I would love to have been flies on the wall.
Yeah, we're like, this is a conversation we might have together. So we got to bring this up.
So you're sitting in there. You're having a conversation with your husband and you're telling him about your business idea, but there was something else really big that you revealed at that conversation.
So
can you share that?
Yeah. So I had come up with this idea. I'd sort of been incubating this idea to go and start this company. And that's when I thought I was finally at a point after calling around to some of the bottling manufacturers that I was going to have to, pay some money and in order to get in. So I thought, I don't want him thinking that I'm taking $50,000 out of our bank account and I'm going to have some boondoggle in the Bahamas or something with my friends. I should probably, really tell him what I'm doing. And so after I'd written the business plan, that's when I actually wasn't feeling that great. And then I did a pregnancy test and I found out I was pregnant. And so I went to him. Your
fourth child.
With our fourth. Yeah. And so I went to him and decided I would start with the business and kind of get his buy-in on that. And I was also leaving the next day to go to Chicago to do our first bottling run. And I thought it was time. I mean, it was like leaving in 20 hours to go. And I had babysitter coverage and the whole thing. And so I shared the story with him and, he gets stuck on, he's a lawyer, right? He gets stuck on the little thing. He's like, wait, so you're starting a beverage company and you're taking $50,000 out of our bank account? And I said, yeah. And he said, so what's the name of the beverage? And I said, it's called Wawa. And he said, you've been spending too much time with the kids. And he said, so why Wawa? And I said, well, because that's how you get kids to drink water. And he said, that's how you get kids to drink water. But it's just, that's not the way the rest of the world works. And he's a New Yorker and he had grown up around the East Coast where in Pennsylvania, there's this chain of stores called Wawa. And of course, me growing up in Arizona, I didn't know anything about this. And he said, just don't do that. I'm not going to argue with you about starting a company. You've made a little bit of money and I'm happy that you're, trying to do something that's purposeful, but think of another name. And so we didn't use a naming agency. It was literally us in the kitchen, just sitting here, just not arguing, but just sort of him making fun of my big idea. Right. And that's when I said, we're giving people hints. It's a hint of flavor. And I didn't even know what I was saying. And then I said, hint. He said 4-letter word. And that's when I just really didn't like him at this point. And I said, yeah, well, you're the lawyer and I'm the business person. And would you please file, to see if we can get the trademark. And then I said, oh, and by the way, I'm pregnant. And he said, what? And he just couldn't believe it. He said, this is crazy. You're starting a beverage company in an industry that is, nothing about. And I said, yeah, that's what I'm doing. And he walked out of the room. I didn't know if he was coming back. And I just sort of waited to see if I heard anything. And then he came back in and he said, so what time are you leaving tomorrow? And he said, you want me to come? And I said, yeah, I do. And he was still not happy with me. Right. But I think he thought he was going to Chicago to sort of show me that this was not a good idea. I don't know if you guys have ever had those situations, but he just said, instead of telling her, I'm going to show her. And then when he got there and he actually saw the bottles, the initial run, he said, okay, I get it now. It's like a physical product versus you're working in bits and bytes, and this is totally different. And I said, that's not why I want to start a beverage company at all. And he said, why do you want to start a beverage company? And I said, because if I can actually create a product that helps people enjoy water, then I could actually change health in the world.
Yeah.
And he just sat there and looked at me, and he's the son of a doctor too, who, you know, as a kid, talk about like growing up. I mean, as a kid, he heard so often from his dad how frustrating it was for him when he's a gastroenterologist, where people would come and, you know, he'd send them home and he wouldn't know whether or not they actually did what he told them to do. And then, you know, they would get sick, they would get cancer, and he'd feel terrible, but he had no way of actually being there and telling him. And what he saw was that just by telling people to drink more water, he said, that's like kind of brilliant on a lot of levels. And I said, oh yeah, right. You're just trying to make up for, you know, making fun of me in this process. And he said, no, it's just really interesting. And so, you know, we never planned on working together. We finally, when I ended up having Justin, which is a whole other story.
No, okay. We want to talk to you about that.
Save that.
Yeah.
We have
and he, I mean, that's when, you know, he just like was trying to be helpful. I'm sure you're the same way, right? Like it's, as he's always said, happy wife, happy life, you know, and he's always, you know, somewhat joke, but somewhat serious, had that theory. And so I think he never really intended. But, you know, what's interesting, when he was a lawyer, he sort of, you know, we grew up in very different households. I mean, he just thought he was supposed to be a lawyer, right? It was just the thing to do. You know, his dad was a doctor. You be a doctor or a lawyer. And then all of a sudden he met crazy Kara, you know, she just plops in and he's like, wait, what? You got on a plane and you went and found a way to get a job. And you know, it was just a whole different mindset. And so he knew, as we talked about in the book, that I just felt like I didn't really know if I had all the parts to the plane. I was just flying it and I was going to see what happened. And I sleep well. I don't like sit there and, you know, I just have a good time along the way and I meet people. And I think I was telling the story the other day, and one that I don't really share or we don't talk about too much in the book, but I remember him even going to the initial bottling plants and meeting these people that were actually working on the lines and how they actually taught him so much about something that he didn't know. So it's the same kind of thing about just learning, right? Being this constant learner, that he felt like it wasn't even something that he learned in school. And it wasn't, and even today, I mean, I think he joined sort of joking, like chief operating officer. He was helping me deliver cases in the car. And then all of a sudden he hopped in and, you know, today, I mean, he's worked on automating our plant. I mean, which totally in so many ways saved us during the being able to produce during the pandemic and just like the things that he's sort of jumped into, not even knowing, like even a year ago, that he would have been working on some of these things. I think he's in the same boat that I am, that just being a lifelong learner and sort of, you know, taking that journey. So
they say learning and growing is living. You know, if you don't have that in your life, if you aren't constantly growing as a person, that you don't feel like you're living, and part of you dies a little bit. So we are totally on the same page with you. But I want to go back to the story. We just got to hear this part, because this is that's such an entrepreneurial story. That's something we would do. Tell us about your first delivery of Hint to Whole Foods, because that's a great little short story we want to hear.
So we're living in San Francisco, and as most people can imagine, parking spaces are limited. We happen to live in a house where we had 2 parking spaces, and we had produced product. We thought it was going to show up like 2 weeks before I was going to be delivering my son, Justin. but it shows up the day before. This happens all the time in launches. Like it never is on time. And that was the case. And when they dropped it the day before, they put it in my garage. So we didn't have, there was no space for the car, and we had parked it out on the street where you get lots and lots of very expensive tickets. So I thought, here I'm going to deliver my baby. I'm having a planned C-section, and I'm going to deliver my baby. And the next day, and my poor nanny is going to be watching 3 kids. And I'm like, how is she going to actually go out and move the car around the block while the kids are inside the house? All, the logistics of the whole thing as a parent. And so I thought, I've got to figure out a way how to get this product. And here I am, huge and really pregnant. And so that morning I wake up and my husband said, so what do you want to do today? We don't have to be at the hospital till 2:00. And I said, well, I don't know. Let's go to Whole Foods and see if we can get product on the shelf. And he said, I was thinking brunch or go for a walk or something. He's like, what's going on? And I said, well, I don't know. I want to get the garage cleaned up because it'll be, that's me.
Yeah.
And he said, okay, fine. I'll go with you. And, you can't go by yourself. And so he's got his dolly and we've got 10 cases loaded up. He's like, I don't want you lifting. So we go to Whole Foods, and I hadn't been really in Whole Foods that much for a couple of months because I was just running around trying to produce the product. And so I walked into Whole Foods and I found the guy that I had been asking a bunch of questions to. And he said, and I said, hi, do you remember me? And he said, wow, you're super pregnant. And I said, yeah, I am. And he said, are you going to deliver the baby in the store? And I was like, well, I hope not. I mean, it's possible, but
I'm on my way to the hospital right now.
I'm on my way. I said, I'm going to deliver in a few hours at California Pacific. And he said, how do you know you're going to deliver a baby in a few hours? And I said, because I'm having a planned C-section. And he said, so what's a planned C-section? And so then I went on to, or I said, do you mean like what's the difference between a planned C-section and an emergency C-section? And he said, yeah. And I said, okay, well, I've had both of them, so I can cover both of that. And then my husband was just like, oh my God, she's really going there now. And so he walks back into the fruits and vegetables. He's like, I am not going to sit here and listen to this whole thing and see how this goes. And so he walked around the store. And then when he came back, the guy was saying to me, thank you so much for explaining that. I never had any sisters. I always, was kind of curious how babies were, what was a planned C-section? I was like, no problem. I was like, by the way, do you think you could like get the product on the shelf and maybe put it in the cold box? And he said, I'll try, but there's no guarantees. And I was, kind of thinking, I've been spending time with you here, like doing education. Yeah. And he said, I'll really try. And so my husband's like, okay, Kara, come on, let's go. And so we left and go to the hospital. My son Justin's born. We're sitting in the hospital room and the phone rings, and your friends and your family don't call when you have your 4th child, by the way. They just think like, oh, she's
she's got that
boring and I don't want to go there. It's like, fine.
Yeah.
So my phone rings and I'm so excited. And it's the guy from Whole Foods. And so I hear my husband talking to him. And then I said, what's wrong? And my husband said, he said that the product's gone. And I said, give me the phone. And I said, who took the product? Because I still didn't believe that it sold.
Yeah. You're thinking like the manager took it off the shelves or something. Yeah.
Threw it in the garbage. I don't know what they did. And I was pissed. Right. And so he, it was, so that's when he said, no, he said, you've sold 10 cases overnight. And I was like, really? Like, we don't have that much. We only have like now less than a pallet in my garage. And I said, this is crazy. And he said, yeah, well, I mean, I'm going to get in a lot of trouble if you guys don't replenish the product pretty quickly. And I know you're in the hospital. And so I called the nurse and I said, can you check me out of the hospital? And she said, no, you have like 2 more days in the hospital. And I said, no, I need to get out of the hospital because I just launched a product and it's selling. And she's just looking at me like, what? And so that's when my husband really jumped in and said, you'll go home, you'll rest, I'll go deliver the product. And that's really when he joined. But you never know. I mean, it's a story that I've talked a lot about, educating, and actually 3 colleges have taken on the book since it's launched and had it as part of like a class. And it's funny, one of the schools I was speaking at Wharton, and they said, so what's the lesson there? And I said, I think it's being, educating, always be educating. And you just never know, and people love knowledge, right? And how do you make those connections and all of those kind of things that you just never know what doors they're going to open.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Now, I want you to take us back to a moment in your business where you were struggling, where most people would have quit. Do you have a story, like a moment where most people would have quit?
Or
like
maybe you were thinking about quitting.
Or maybe you were thinking about quitting, but you kept going anyway.
After about a year, I was really feeling like I was not going to be able to figure this thing out. That it was just, and, I was also kind of giving up salary as so many people told me that I could get another job in tech. And I don't know, I felt like I was just in over my head in so many ways. And that's when I decided to, I was sharing with a girlfriend of mine that I just wasn't sure if I was going to continue. What was I doing? I had 4 young kids. I mean, there was just a lot of reasons why I couldn't figure out how to produce the product, how to distribute the product. And that's when she connected me with somebody who she had met on an airplane. And he's very senior level executive at Coca-Cola. Right. And he was kind enough to get on the phone with me. And I was so excited because I thought, here's this person with lots of experience. And, they're a multi-billion-dollar company. And they're going to he's just going to wave his magic wand and solve all my problems. And it's just going to be great. And that's when, about 15 minutes into the conversation of me sort of selling him on like my idea, that's when he interrupted me and said, sweetie, Americans love sweet. This product isn't going anywhere. And I thought, wait, did he just call me sweetie? This is, I was like, wait, what just happened? Yeah. And it kind of threw me, but a lot of people have asked me, why didn't you just give up at this point? Because this person who has a lot of knowledge and experience suddenly is telling you your idea, sucks, right? And I don't know the answer other than the fact that I was sort of stunned. And so I just sat there and listened for a while. And I'm so thankful for that moment, because I feel like it was at that moment when maybe I should have felt like it was time to sort of throw in the towel. But instead, as I was listening, I was really listening to his words. And I realized at the end of the next 45 minutes, he never talked about health and about sort of a purpose. And instead, he was saying, the fact that I had been drinking diet soda and it was, causing me to, whether it's, gain weight or keep weight or, all of these sort of health issues that I was experiencing. He was saying, no, I was hearing from customers that were buying my product at, Whole Foods and some other little stores that they were loving just having a water that just didn't have sweeteners in it. And they were getting healthier. And he was just sitting here saying, no, that's not it. They just want, customers are going to tell you that, but they just want 0 calories. At the time, diet drinks were at like 10 calories at that point. They hadn't perfected like 0 calories. And I remember thinking, I should be thinking that I'm going to give up. But that was a moment where I realized that sometimes when you actually are sort of, at the end, right, where you just think that this is it, you start to get so much clarity just by somebody just kind of doing what they do. And that's for me where I hung up the phone and I realized I had a choice. And the choice was that I either quit, which he probably thought I did, right? For at least for a couple of years. Or I could realize that what I'm doing is on a totally different mission. And so who is he to actually say that my idea is stupid? Right? Because it just was like on parallel paths. And I remember getting off the phone and just thinking I could quit, or, instead I could just go figure it out. Like in many ways, it energized me to kind of hear that, this person with lots of years of experience was actually, number one, not yet thinking that my idea was what he should be doing, because it bought me time. To some extent, but also that, things that I was trying to solve, like a drink that not only didn't have sweeteners in it, but also didn't have preservatives in it. He didn't think it was important.
Right. It's just checks and balances for him. He's looking at an Excel spreadsheet. He has no mission.
Yeah.
That's so important.
And it wasn't a mission. And this was, right? And this was like 15 years ago when, I guess 14 years ago when I had that Coke meeting, but it was really clear to me that we weren't even calling a company like mine a mission-driven company, right? It wasn't our purpose, but I would say to people that, I'm starting this company because it helped me get healthy, to know that I could find a product that helped me drink water that tasted better. And it was just these big soda companies were, very clearly trying to trick people into, thinking that things were healthier than they were by focusing on calories. And I just thought it's kind of messy, right? And so now, it's something I talk about to entrepreneurs all the time, that you think that the people that you need to worry about are the people that have, the big companies and the huge experience. And actually the people that go and disrupt industries, also, we haven't talked about this, but create categories, which are not just launching a company is like climbing a mountain. Launching a category is like climbing Everest, right? You have to get consumer adoption, whether, you're talking about Facebook or Apple or Hint or, Spanx or whatever it is, something new. It's like you have to, consumers don't understand it.
You're educating at the same time as launching your company.
Yeah. And it just takes time. And so for a large company, it's very difficult. You can't buy the consumer into learning, right? They have to adapt, and it takes time to do that kind of stuff. So anyway, again, along the way, I that was probably the first meeting, and now it's just expanded so much more where, I think that the consumer who's curious, who is just thinking about these things, who's obsessive about thinking about, not only the problem, but how to solve it, is really are the people that you really have to look for and that you worry about. It's not the people that are the, coming from the large companies that have been, that's actually, that's a hindrance for them to be able to go and launch something, because they've been trained to look at the Excel spreadsheets and the numbers all the time.
Yep. I totally get that. Yeah. And by the way, launching a beverage company is like a whole nother level. I tried to, and we actually we launched a water 15 years ago, and it failed miserably. So, I know how hard it is with shelf space, and how the kingpins of the space can really control the market. So kudos to you for what you guys were able to do. How did launching this company or building this company with your kids around, how were they affected? What did it do for them? Like, did you see a difference in them? Were they able to be a part of it?
I love that you included them in the journey. I love that.
Yeah. And it's hard, I think, when your kids are 2 and 6 and you don't really understand how much they're actually picking up. But one of the things that I share in the book is when my son, who's now 18, when he was 12, we're sitting at the dinner table, and he said, Mom, he was listening to Sheryl Sandberg on TV talk about lean in. And he said, Mom, I just realized that women aren't CEOs. And I thought, oh God, Like, do I really have to hear this from my 12-year-old son? It's like the last conversation you want to, have, especially with your child. And that's when, I didn't really know what to say. I just was sort of nodding my head and sort of ignoring him to some extent. And then the next day, still that day, he said, well, I think you do a great job. So I just don't really understand why women aren't CEOs. And I said, well, I don't know either. I mean, and he said, it's just really strange. And he was curious and he was thinking about it. The next day he plays a ton of tennis and he came back and from school and he said, why is it that there's separate girls and boys teams? And I said, what do you mean? And he said, there's girls that are better tennis players on the girls team that I'd rather play with than the boys, but we're not allowed to play with the girls. And shouldn't it be based on ability and not on gender? And and it was at that point where I said, well, maybe you should go work on that. And he said, yeah, maybe I should. And it was at that point when I realized that just by living and doing and, not necessarily meaning to educate.
Showing by example.
Amen.
That he was just, he was thinking about things. And and I mean, and again, I talk to parents a lot about this and even have talked to my employees about this too, that certainly there's times where, you think like, am I a bad mom? Do my kids think I suck? That I'm working and I'm doing this. And I tried really hard to, especially as they got older and show up at their tennis matches and do stuff. I was never really part of the PTA. I was more about my kids. And, but it was interesting because I think they're sponges and they pick up on things. And even things like, teachers have said to me, just having your kids in class, my husband and I work together. Right. And so it's just, that's not normal. That's not supposed to work. Right. And that's also, just things along the way that they've learned about raising money, about, is my favorite one when my daughter, I think was 8. One of my friends called me. She said, I said to your daughter, where's your mom these days? And she said, she's either in Atlanta, like fighting the soda company, or she might be in Washington taking on Congress for water rights. I'm not really sure.
Gosh.
And she was right. And, the fact that they see, even to this day, I mean, they're always asking me, what's she doing? I mean, I remember another one of my oldest daughter said to me when the pandemic hit and, the world is shutting down and everybody is going back and shelter in place and we're an essential product. And so we're, giving people, thankfully, we had a bunch of N95 masks left over from the fires.
Wow.
And so we're handing everybody N95 masks and gloves and hand sanitizers. And we're saying, here you go. And they're feeling like, I had a few of my older employees say to me, call me up and say, are you trying to kill us? You're telling us to go out to the stores while everybody's saying go shelter in place. And I said, you're an essential product. And, we have to go in and we have to support the stores and, I didn't know how to manage during that time. And I remember my daughter saying, are you sure you're doing the right thing? And I said, no, I'm not. I'm not sure that I'm doing the right thing, but what I'm doing right now is I'm going to take on a route in Marin County and I'm going to go out with Ben, who's in Marin County normally. And I said, let me split the stores with you. And he said, you're the CEO of the company. What are you doing? And I said, no. I want to make sure that we're doing the right thing because I don't want my team to not be safe. And so my kids even watching me, in that situation where, I would tell them, I said, I figured out that if basically going into Target before 7:00 in the morning is a very different experience than 11:00 in the morning, right? There's no one there in the store. And so I would go back to my team and I'd say, go, you're in Ohio, go and ask the manager, if it's okay if you come in before they open or right when they're opening and just go get it done and then get out of there, because you'll be, a lot more safe. Where did I learn that? I don't know. Right. Just from, and again, I wanted my team to be safe, but I also knew that we couldn't stop.
Right. Yeah. CEO, you're a CEO and you have to make hard decisions sometimes.
We didn't furlough anybody in the process. That was a whole other topic that we just said, we won't furlough you if we can figure out something else for you to do in the company. Like, we need to merchandise. We had people who were in totally different functions, like events were all shutting down. And even before events shut down, we said, it's not really safe for you to be handing out water. How can you actually safely distance? And I didn't want my team, I didn't want, them to be around people that they could get sick. I didn't want people getting sick from my team. And I just said, you know what? Just tell people we'll drop the cases at the event, because there were still people that were wanting to do events for a couple of weeks before it officially shut down. And I said, we'll totally give you the cases. But I had a few phone calls from people saying, you got to show up at my event. And I said, I'm sorry, I will give you all the product that you want. I mean, how sampling and stuff do, but I can't have people there. It's just not. So again, how do you learn how to lead during that time? How do you know how to, you don't.
You figure it out along the way.
You figure it out along the way. But you also put yourself in their shoes. And I was never in the military, but I have plenty of friends that I've talked to over the years. And I think that that's something that probably a great military leader would say too.
Yeah, it's important not to have your team do anything that you wouldn't do yourself.
Yeah. And I think that's a lesson that, hopefully my team and you gain from the book as well, that it's just something that I've learned just about leading as well. And it's just that even if you don't be afraid to actually sort of just try, right? And actually be honest and be authentic about, what you do know how to do. And anybody who said that they knew how to lead during a pandemic was lying, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because it's just, we had never been through it in our lifetime. And now we have. I mean, that's something to be thankful for, that, we were able, right? And it's true.
Speaking of pandemic, our audience right now is facing the pivot. I had to bring it up while you were discussing that. They're facing the pivot. They're trying to work together and they're facing obstacles. It's just very hard for some couples to work together. And we get a lot of emails. So I wanted to get your insight on a couple working together. How did you strengthen your relationship? Because, you guys went hard as a couple in business, but then how did you strengthen your relationship? I think that that's really a valuable thing that we need to touch on, even if just for a second, because they're facing it.
First of all, I don't think it works for everybody to work together, right? And I think I've always been, I think that if you start to see that it's not working, you need to figure out, is your relationship more important than, and I've known people who have made that decision, right? And I think it's a valid one when you actually see that, there's more fights than not. I think in the case of us, we both had a strong appreciation for what each other did. Right. And, I was much more on the brand and sort of customer, and he was much more on, the operations and how it all works. And so very different skill sets. And yet we knew that, A plus B equals C. And then in addition to that, I think having a young family, there were days where, you had one who was sick and somebody had to stay home, and we just sort of looked at the schedule. We never even thought about it. I mean, it was just like, no, I'll stay home. I'll, no problem. It was just, and we typically wouldn't like fly and travel together. Sometimes we would, but we really tried to kind of figure it out. And again, it's not ever going to always be perfect, but I think that the main thing is try and realize, how do you appreciate each other? How do you get through these challenging times? try and take breaks together. I think even still to this day, I mean, I was joking this morning with my daughter because they always know where to find us at and we go out hiking with my dogs at like 5:30 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, who is awake at 5:30 in California? But we just get up and we just go and, and we've just gotten that. To me is just, I mean, it's sort of this not only Zen time, but our house backs up to a state park, and I mean, there's coyotes. There's kind of like where you guys are. I mean, there's for me, wildlife is like my happy place. And I just love like seeing new birds and seeing, and also getting out. I mean, we go between, 3 and 6 miles a day and take our dogs out. And it's just, I don't know, it's just really nice. And it's nice to have that time together. I mean, a lot of the day we both have separate stuff going on, and then we regroup like at night. But again, finding that time where, even sometimes people are like, do you talk about work? Sometimes, I mean, it's just, we don't try and like, right. But sometimes there's days when I'm like, I can't talk about work anymore. And he does the same thing. It's like, that's okay, great. Right. Like, it's stop putting artificial kind of, you can't do this, you don't do this. And instead just live.
I love that.
Right. And I think it's important. We also used to, I mean, prior to the pandemic, I mean, we used to go on, especially when my kids got a little bit older. It got really hard when the kids were sort of in that, kind of, they were in school, but they had a lot of activities time. And I think, what I would have done differently is I would have really taken breaks like every couple of months to just get out, go to Cabo or something, for a few days. And, because it's just, sometimes you just need to go drink margaritas and just be stupid, and just like with no kids, right? And just, and I really
like
think
that other life doesn't exist for a second.
Yeah. And I think it's really important. And also like, as our kids, like they would want us to go, especially when they were in high school. I'm sure they were really naughty. They'd be like, when are you guys getting out of here? That's our, but then also, as they get older, I think what's really fun too is, also even when our kids got older and we were taking them with them, I mean, some of our happiest times is taking them and, we would still sneak away and go do our own thing. But that's something, that I think is really important too, to create memories, not just for, you two, but also as your kids get older. And, it's just funny stuff where, and we've taken them to Alaska and, and done. We were fortunate enough to go to I had so many miles. We went to the Maldives last year for 2 weeks.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I mean, went diving, and and just, just doing things where you can get that like one-on-one time, not only for yourself, but also individually with your kids.
Amen.
It goes by so quick.
The precious
they grow
years,
up so fast.
Yes.
It does. But those are the memories that they remember.
That's right.
And then they bring them back and, and they still laugh about stuff.
That's all they'll remember, really. They'll remember those moments in their life. They're not going to remember the small stuff too much. They're not going to remember going to school. They're not going to remember that one day in school why they just hung out, or they're going to remember when you went on this meaningful vacation with your family and you guys had a great time.
And even like, I'll tell you something really quick. I mean, it's interesting. When we were coming back from the Maldives, we went through Singapore and on the way back. And that was the first, this is in January last year. And they were talking about coronavirus. And that was the first place in January where we were hearing about coronavirus. And I remember I think it was my son, he said to me, wouldn't you be so bummed if they called the virus hint? Like he was just, and I remember just, we were listening, we were walking on the streets in Singapore. And I said, oh my gosh, the Corona family must be just truly bumming, like on a lot of levels, right? And and it was this crazy thing. And they were, it was really weird because they were starting to get fearful of it. And I remember it so well where we were like, we got to get out of here. Like, let's get back to San Francisco. And we got back and we were telling some of our friends. And I mean, it went in like one ear and out the other. Nobody really was paying attention to what we were talking about. But now as a family, we all talk about that. And we just said, whoa, like what,
that would have been bad.
Right. But also that we were experiencing it and that they were thinking about it from a brand standpoint too, that it was just, again, it's just making those connections like that, that they still talk about.
That EQ will last with them. They're going to, who knows what they're going to do, like you said, but they've been given a lot of lessons, I'm sure, being around you and your husband as you guys were building.
They wanted to know if the Corona family was going to sue. Like they were, I mean, and I said, they were like, what do you think? And, my husband's a lawyer and he's like, no, I don't think so, but it's interesting. I mean, it's, like, so.
Something to think about for sure. So real quick question, the little one, there's somebody out there right now who has an idea, who's going through an issue and they figured out a way to solve it with either a product or an idea. What would you tell that person who's trying to figure out what to do next? What's the next actionable step that they would take?
Yeah, the tactical steps.
I think that the most important thing for entrepreneurs to remember, aspiring entrepreneurs, is that ideas are a dime a dozen. I have 10 a day, right? And it's just figuring out, do you have a solve? Right. And so, and not making that problem, and figuring out how to actually, like, I think sometimes people just think, okay, they immediately stop there. Maybe they've got an idea to solve a problem, but then they think, okay, I don't have experience in the industry. I don't have any money. I don't have any of these things. And instead, if you just think about one or two steps that actually maybe you can just, one or two steps that help you to get 5 steps, right? And just tiny little steps instead of making it so daunting, right? That's the most important thing. And so I think that is, that's really the most. Don't think about, well, I don't have any experience, or don't count yourself out. Don't build up your wall any more than you are. Instead, just make it small. And first, and just figure out, broad strokes, or however you want to think about it. How do you, like, what would you do? And I think that that's the most important thing that people need to do. And then, I think that the other thing, if you're sitting at home, maybe you haven't worked for a few years, maybe you got furloughed and you're trying to figure out, okay, how do I,
which is a lot of people right now.
Right. And what do I do next? Maybe you're at home because your kids are being homeschooled and you're trying to figure out exactly what to do. As I always share with people, you probably got a little bit of time where you can go online. You can figure out how to write a business plan. If nothing else, imagine if you decide that you're going to totally do something else, but you never knew how to write a business plan. Maybe you're just going on and Googling. I mean, that's the beauty of it, where you can actually figure out on YouTube or Google or whatever how to do like tiny little things. Maybe you don't actually get to your goal of launching a company, but maybe you actually figure out who else is doing this out there. What is it priced at? What is it? I mean, that's super interesting. If nothing else, if somebody asked you at your next dinner party, what did you do over COVID? Well, I thought about launching a business, but then I wrote a business plan and and people would be like, wait, what? She did that? He did that? I mean, it's just take baby steps along the way to actually figure out what you ultimately want to do.
Right. Because it could be the next business, right? Maybe it's not that business. Maybe you figured out, there's somebody doing it better right now already. So maybe I'll just keep my eyes open, and then the next thing comes along, and then maybe that's the one that you actually start, right? Because you never know where you're going to plant your feet.
And you learn, and you often surprise yourself, right? Because you weren't supposed to be able to write the business plan. You weren't supposed to be that knowledgeable about an industry, and you've actually, figured it out in some way that you didn't think you could actually do it. And I think that the most as I've said before, I mean, the most happy people are the ones that, they just start walking, right? They just start figuring out, how do I just do something and head in that direction? I don't know if I'm going to get there or not, but it's just, heading in that way and knowing that you don't have to do that. I mean, that's the beauty of our world, right? You can stop.
You said it perfect. Just start walking.
Dang.
Just start walking. My son. So we have a little bit of loudness going on over here. What's the one business book you would leave with your kids to help them along their journey?
Leave with my kids.
And it can't be yours.
Yeah, you just you want to leave them a book that would help them along their journey, whatever that right now. You're going to leave them a book right now to help them on their journey of life. What would that book be?
Success.
Even if it's not a business book.
Even a self-help book, whatever.
I know. There's so many.
Right.
I mean, probably one of my favorite books is The Giving Tree. I mean, I loved that book over the years just because I think it's, you guys have read that.
I haven't.
You have.
I have.
We have it.
Really?
Oh, it's such a. This is your book tonight. It's such a great book.
I read like 2 books or 3 books a month. So like sometimes.
Oh, you're referring to the kids' book, right? The Giving Tree.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I'm thinking of like this big, thick business book. I'm like, who wrote this book? Sorry.
No, it's a great, it's a kid's book. It's a super, super great book. I'm looking at all my different books. I wish I could, I mean, there's so many.
Well, of course, your book has so many great lessons in it. I love how you wrote it, actually. You tell your life story. And I think you start off by saying, I'm not going to tell my life story, but you tell your life story. But you give actionable lessons all the way through and how they applied to you and what you actually learned from those moments in your life. If you were going to leave your kids, we all have a finite amount of time that we're on this earth, and it's all such a blessing. And we all, we enjoy that time with our kids. But if you were leaving some parting knowledge with your kids to take them on their journey of their life, what would that knowledge be?
Just to know that you need to go try, and you need to go and you don't have to make one decision, right? You have to go figure it out, and you'll continue growing along the way and figuring out what you want to do. And don't put so much pressure on yourself to figure it out tomorrow either. I think just keep growing.
I love that. That is so good, because that's the exact knowledge I would give my kids. Go out and just try something. Just go do it, because then, you're at a time right now where you can figure out maybe you don't like that, and then you go try something else. But if you don't go try, you're never going to know.
Never going to know.
So good, Kara. Thank you so much for spending time with us.
Yes.
I'm sorry we kept you a little bit over, but we had to get the good stuff.
We're good. And come visit me on social at Kara Goldin. And
yes, tell us all the places we can find you. We know you have the Kara Goldin Show or podcast, which is really great. You've interviewed some amazing people. We just saw, who was the young lady that she had just interviewed?
Allie Brown, was it?
Yes.
Allie.
Yes.
Yeah, Allie's my buddy. I love Allie. And so many people. The founder of Pop Chips, about, leaving a company that you founded and then going and, doing another company. Like, there's a lot there on,
so much.
Like it's your baby and then you decide to leave, and so many.
And then, of course, Undaunted. Anybody who hasn't read that book, you have to go pick up that book. It's a brand new book, Undaunted,
so
Overcoming
good,
Doubts and Doubters. What a great book. We both enjoyed it. We actually listened to it separately, and then we actually listened to it together again. So it was great to listen to it twice.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us, and we will catch you soon. And we'll be drinking Hint all along the way.
We love you so much, and we love your story. Thank you.
And your water.
Yeah. You guys shoot me your address.
We will. We really appreciate that. Maybe we'll have it sent to we own a real estate office too. We're not there daily. We have somebody that runs the office and everything, but we would love to have it there. That would be awesome.
We would love to.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kara.
Thanks. Have a great weekend, you guys. Great to meet you. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. What a great story she has, Dan. It's
Yeah.
so powerful. Like there was so many times when my eyes just welled up a little and I got goosebumps. I loved talking to her. When we first saw her story, we knew we had to have her on the show because she's talking to our audience.
And she has 4 kids. I mean, she started this $100 million company with 4 kids, and it's so great, the story about where she's dropping off, her first bottles to Whole Foods, really not knowing like that his Whole Foods even going to take it, and she drops off these bottles and then goes and literally has her baby that same day. Those are stories that you'll never forget, and I'm so glad she wrote a book.
I love that. I mean, and it reminds me of my mom because having the emergency C-section, it reminds me of the story of my mom finishing up the paperwork and then, wrapping it up. This is a female entrepreneur wrapping it up, going to have the baby, and then it's back to business.
Yeah, back to business.
I love it. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, she was really great. And if you guys are listening right now, be sure to pick up her book, Undaunted. You will not be sorry. It's a great story, and especially female entrepreneurs, because I think it's important and this was important for me, but to hear, and I enjoyed it too, even as a man, I enjoyed hearing her journey.
Husband jumped on board with her and they created something great. I think it's very important for
it's important to hear what they could do together.
Yeah.
But for females, it's important to hear other females being strong and being able to create amazing things and running this company that she does and building it to that mark, to that $100 million mark. It's just a really good book, and I think you'll get so much from it. Not only do you hear her story, but she tells you along the way what she learned from those things that she went through. So Undaunted, Overcoming Doubts.
And we'll link it for you guys.
The Doubters and Doubters. So don't forget to pick it up. Yeah, we'll link it. It'll be in the show notes. And also, if you get a chance, catch her podcast, The Kara Goldin Show. Thank you all for listening to this episode of the Pretty and Punk podcast.
Yes, thank you.
If you got something from this show, be sure to share it. There are so many female entrepreneurs out there figuring out their businesses, and this was a great episode for any entrepreneur who has an idea that can solve a problem. So please share on whatever platforms you guys are on, because there are other people out there who can really use this information.
And absolutely share it with your loved ones and the people that you know that this is going to bring so much value to. Don't forget to tag us on Instagram or whatever platform you use on social media, because we want to celebrate you doing your thing. And we know being an entrepreneur and a parent isn't easy, and we want to shine the spotlight on you running that business. So share your business with us so we can put the spotlight on it and get some eyes for you. And also, when you leave a review, we read all of them to our kids and they absolutely love it. So keep that coming. It's like Christmas morning when we get the reviews and get to share it with the kids. And we're so grateful to learn about you and your story and how we can bring you more value.
And connect with us at prettyandpunk.com and also on Instagram at Pretty and Punk Podcast. Find all the links below in the show notes. And remember, life doesn't happen to you. It happens for you.
I hope you love Q as much as I did. If you did, please leave a review. Thank you for listening. God bless you. Thank you.